All right, today we're doing something a little different. Instead of just diving into a new topic, we're actually going to upgrade the most important tool we have for learning about any topic, and that's our critical thinking. We're going to take it from this kind of flat 1D thing and turn it into a full 3D model.
So let's just jump right in with a question I think we've all asked ourselves at some point. How do you spot a bad argument? I mean, that's the classic starting point, isn't it? Somebody makes a claim and your brain just automatically starts scanning for holes, for logical fallacies, for any shoddy evidence.
And honestly, for most of us, that's kind of where the process stops. You know, we spot the flaw, we call it out, maybe we get that little satisfying feeling, and then we move on. Job done. We've successfully critiqued their thinking.
But here's the big idea for today. That entire approach, well, that's only 1D thinking. It's kind of like looking at a really complex 3D object, but only being able to see its shadow on the wall. It's totally flat, it's incomplete, and most importantly, it leaves our own biggest blind spots completely exposed.
Okay, so it's time to add some depth. We're going to move from that 1D approach to real 3D critical thinking, and we're going to build a framework that's just way more powerful for making sense of the world. So what are these three dimensions? Well, here they are. First, you've got the outward axis. This is the classic stuff, analyzing other people's arguments. Second, we turn it around with the inward axis, where we have to audit our own reasoning. And finally, there's the environmental axis. This is all about recognizing how our information ecosystem, our feeds, everything, how it shapes what we even get to see in the first place. So let's break each one down.
All right, let's kick things off with Dimension 1, the outward toolkit. Now, this is going to feel like familiar territory, but trust me, we're going to use a much sharper tool than just yelling logical fallacy. And that tool is a simplified version of something called the Toulmin model. It is super simple but incredibly powerful. It just looks you break any argument down into three basic parts. First, you've got the claim, that's just, what's being asserted. Then there's the data, the evidence they're giving you. And then, and this is the really important part, you have the warrant. Think of the warrant as the invisible bridge that's supposed to connect the data to the claim.
And that brings us to the absolute key takeaway for this first dimension. The warrant. That's where most arguments just silently fall apart. It's the hidden assumption that holds the whole thing together, or doesn't. So imagine someone says, hey, the company's profits are down. That's the data. So we should definitely fire the CEO. That's the claim. The unstated warrant, the hidden belief, is that the CEO is solely responsible for profits. Is that true? Maybe, maybe not, but finding and questioning that hidden warrant, that is the single most powerful thing you can do when you're analyzing someone else's argument. Okay, so we've practiced looking outward. Now for what is, let's be honest, the much harder part. It's time to take that same critical lens and turn it right back on ourselves. Time to look in the mirror. And a really fantastic way to think about this is the soldier versus scout mindset. So a person in a soldier mindset has one goal: defend their existing beliefs no matter what. Their brain is always asking, how can I shoot this new information down? On the other hand, the scout's goal is totally different. They just want to create the most accurate map of reality they can. So they ask, is this true? And the key thing to get here is that this isn't about how smart you are. It's all about what's motivating your thinking.
So just take a second and be really honest with yourself. When one of your core beliefs gets challenged by some new evidence, what's your first immediate gut-level instinct? Is it to put up your defenses? Or is it to get curious and explore? Your answer to that pretty much tells you which mindset you're defaulting to in that moment.
All right, so we've looked outward at others, and we've looked inward at ourselves. Now it's time for the final third dimension, and you could argue this is the most critical one for living in the 21st century. It's all about understanding the environmental filter that shapes the entire world of information we see. And this brings us to a term that might sound a little academic, but I promise you it's super practical. It's called digital epistemology. All it really means is learning how to evaluate the systems that deliver information to you. You have to think about how the platforms, their algorithms, their financial incentives to keep you outraged and clicking, how all of that distorts the information before you even see it. It's a huge shift. We can't just critique the message anymore. We have to critique the delivery system itself. So what does that look like in the real world? What are some digital red flags you can actually look for? Well, first, be super skeptical of anything that has a really high emotional punch, but is almost impossible to actually verify. Second, you got to watch out for what I call zombie claims. You know what I'm talking about? These are arguments that have been debunked over and over again, but they just keep coming back from the dead because they spread so well on social media.
And finally, and this is a big one, you have to constantly remind yourself that likes and shares are just a measurement of engagement. They are not evidence that something is true. Look, the key takeaway here is that playing defense and just reacting to this fire hose of bad information, it's just not enough. You'll never win. The single most powerful move you can make in this third dimension is to go on offense. Be proactive. You have to deliberately, consciously curate your information diet. You choose your sources. Don't just sit back and let an algorithm choose them for you.
Okay, so let's tie this all together. We have these 3 dimensions. How do we actually use this stuff in our day-to-day lives? Well, it all starts with having a practical plan.
A really useful tool for this is to think like an ER doctor and use a triage system, right? So for the low-stakes stuff like scrolling through daily news, just do a quick 2-minute mental check. For medium-stakes things, maybe a voting decision, you can do a standard 15-minute check, where you actually try to find the claim, the data, and that hidden warrant. But for the really high-stakes decisions, the ones that affect your core beliefs or your career, that's when you go all in. Use the DEEP protocol, you deploy the entire 3D toolkit.
And the whole point of this is actually really simple, but it's also profound. You have to scale your effort to match the stakes of whatever you're looking at. Because if you don't, you're just going to burn out. You end up in this state of analytical paralysis, where you either overthink every little thing, or you get so overwhelmed you just give up and analyze nothing at all.
So as we wrap this up, I want to leave you with a single question to take with you. Now that you have this 3D framework, this idea of looking outward at others, inward at yourself, and environmentally at your information world, I want you to ask yourself, what do you now suspect is the single biggest blind spot in your own thinking?